Down to the workbench right now, and I wanted to show you something. Now these are both claiming the same thing. This is from Supreme Suspensions. This is from a random eBay store. Link down in the description to both of these. Now, this one does not fit. I tried it. It doesn't, you can't make it fit unless you do a spring compressor, and at which point you're having the upper and lower control arms basically fighting each other. So you compress the spring, and then this is just too much space here. So these both are advertised as a 3-inch lift. This one has 1/2 inch on the bottom for the spring to go in, and it's 1.5 inch actual spacer width. This one has a full inch on the bottom for the spring to fit in, and is 3 inches with spacer. They both say 3-inch lift. For the 2-wheel drive Ram 3500s, 2500s, 1500s with the independent front suspension. They also are both supposed to go in the exact same location on top of the spring, and you'll see when we install these. Now, I tried to install this, and like I said, it did not fit. Basically, I put the jack completely underneath the suspension to compress as much as possible, and it still needed about another 1.5 inches off in order to get things to line up again. It's kind of why there's been a delay on this project, but that's what happened. So we finally got these guys in. These are about $100. These are $80. That's kind of why I decided to try it. Talked to the manufacturer of these. He refused to believe that the suspension works where 1.5 inches will get you 3 inches lift. I'm here to prove him wrong. So we're going to be installing these guys today. All right, so before we get started, going from ground up, the stock height in the front right now is 34.5, just about, hey, call it 34, 35. It's about 34.5 inches though. So that's what we're working with in the front. And in the back, as you can see right here, we're at about 37.5 inches. So that's what we're working with in the back. All right, so went ahead and took off the wheel. As you can see, I'm doing one side at a time. And then I have the truck supported by the frame rails and 2 jack stands. And should be good. So from here, let's go ahead and start taking stuff off. And we'll eventually get to where we need to get to be able to get the spacer in. For those who know where the spacer is gonna go on top of that spring right there. So let's go ahead and get started. All right, so the first thing I'm gonna go ahead and do is remove this brake caliper. There are 2 bolts, one right here, and on the back side, the other one's right here. So we're gonna go and get this taken off to the side and strapped out. The end goal is to be able to detach this upper control arm right here, or not the upper control arm, but this upper ball joint, let this whole piece sit down on the floor basically. So that's kind of what we're after right now and how it's gonna work. So I'm gonna start off moving this guy because this brake line doesn't have enough slack to be able to fully droop the lower control arm. So these guys are an 18mm. Took me the breaker bar to get them loose. Now we got them cracked loose. You can go ahead and pretty much start popping them off. They're freaking on here, that's for sure. So go ahead and pop these 2 guys off, and then we'll get the brake caliper slid off and suspended. All right, so the brake caliper is now out of the way and suspended. Next thing I'm gonna go ahead and do is detach this little guy right here. So just gotta pop the pin out. Once we get this out, we'll be able to get the tie rod off of the truck, and we'll be able to free spin this as we need. So, in all honesty, the order that you do this in doesn't really matter too much. So, okay, so once you get it off like this, go ahead and take your castle nut and flip it upside down to protect the threads. Don't want to hurt anything, and then make it just about like that. I learned this the hard way by hitting on the castle side, and I bent some of my threads and took a while to get this back on, but just one whack, she pops out like so. Go ahead and take the castle nut back off. All right, now the castle nut's off. Set that to the side, and now we can get this out of the way. We can free turn this as needed. So next thing we're gonna go ahead and take off is this guy right here. So this is the sway bar, so we're gonna go ahead and get that off next. Sway bar bolt is a 14. So we went ahead, I just stuck the breaker bar on the bottom so I can get this thing off. It's a 14 on bottom as well. And then we're just gonna go ahead and undo this all the way. And once that's off, I'll show you what it looks like. All right, so that's off now. You can pop this guy off, and it's just a bunch of different little pieces right here. So we got these 2, and then reassembly is kind of self-explanatory, so I'm not really gonna worry about it too much. And from there, this thing should slide out the bottom, but it's being kind of difficult at the moment. There we go. And then this whole thing comes off like that. Now these are out. So let's go ahead and stick these aside. So now that's off, next thing we got to do is we're going to go ahead and release this speed sensor right here. I'm not sure if I want to do it from here and just let it dangle, or if I want to try and undo it from here. I'm going to try to do it from here. Well, you know what? We're not going to do that. We're going to pull it off of here and just hope it's long enough with this much extra slack that it should be fine. All that's really left is the shock absorber and then this piece right here. So go ahead and detach this guy first. We got to get this pin out of here. Pins out, and then let's see what size this bolt is. Be a 22, might be a 21, but 22 is close enough. Yep, that'll do it. It's going the wrong way. So let's go ahead and get this guy off next. All right, so next thing we go ahead and do is get the shock absorber bolt out of here. Pretty sure it's 21. I was using 22 for the other ones, but this guy's kind of tough, so 13/16 is the one I have on hand that also fits. All right, so I went ahead and repositioned the jack underneath this control arm. I believe the shock is definitely weight supporting based on how this bolt was turning. So I want to go ahead and make sure that that's good to go. There it is, so it's free now. That's the back side. Set that off to the side and just keep working this guy out all the way. All right, so now that the shock is free, as you can see, no more bolt. The last thing holding it on is this upper ball joint right here. So I'm going to strike at these two corners, see if we can't get it to loosen up. There we go, and she's free now. So, there we go. Now it's just hanging the lower ball joint. So, let's go lower the jack down and see what happens. Okay, so as you can see, mine didn't fully drop all the way. It just kind of just stuck there. So what I did last time, and I'm gonna do it again this time, was just loosen up these two 21mm bolts right here. Probably the wrong way. But there's one that holds on each lower control arm side. And if you loosen those up, it'll definitely become freer. And there you go, just dropped away like that as soon as we got it loosened up just a little bit. So just bear in mind when you put them back together, make sure you tighten those guys back up. So this is the big guy right here. This is the spring. So all we got to do is literally lift right out like that. Isolator's a little worse for wear as it seems, but yeah, so that's the spring. Now let's go ahead and grab our lift kit and stick it on there. So spring suspensions piece, all it is this little guy. Gonna sit right on top of the spring like so, and then you take your isolator. You know what, I'm not going to use the isolator. This thing's beat to crap, and it's kind of tight to get in there, so we're just not going to worry about it. If I get noise, I'll let you know, but I doubt it. I don't take this thing in to do anything crazy. All right, she fits in just like that. Spring down there is back where it needs to be. So now all we got to do, get the jack under here, start hoisting this bad guy back up. So take our jack, support like that, get a better angle, and don't take too much. So we just got to get a good angle. So got some boards I'm going to stick under here to kind of help me out in that aspect. Let's see now. It doesn't just drop. Alright, let's stick another board under there. Just trying to get a good angle with this jack is all. Trying to get it right underneath that spring isolator. Or the, not isolator, but spring in general. Slow it down and try and get another angle. Alright, jacked it up as about as high as I can. It's starting to lift off the back jack right there. That's about as much as we can do there. So next stage, we're gonna go ahead and get this lower control arm back on in. Ah, boy, it's a heavy bitch. This is gonna be fun. I'm gonna fight with this a little bit and then we'll get it. All right, so we got it on. Just took a little bit of muscling. It's not just freaking socket. There we go. Yeah, there she is. So go ahead and crank this guy down now. Okay. All right, so when I got the little guy lined up, we can stick our pin back in now. And let's get this guy back in here, like so. Upper control arm is now good to go. All right, so let's go ahead and get our sway bar on next. And then you might be wondering and asking yourself, what are you doing about the shocks? Don't worry, I have a thing to fix that, and I'll show you what I mean. So obviously this is fully extended, and now you can see there's a gap there. It's not going to reach. What I am doing is getting shock extenders. I looked around for a while for aftermarket shocks that were the right length, but I could not find anything. And I know it's out there. I did eventually find some part numbers. I'll throw in the description as well if you guys are really curious, want to get new shocks. I might do it once I replace these, but I kind of wanted to keep the OEM length just because once you have to replace shocks, if I sell it or anything else, you can just look up the stock shock number and it'll fit just fine. So I'll go ahead and install those in a minute. Let's go ahead and get this guy on first. Okay, so this is the shock absorber extension I was talking about. Some grease right there. And it comes with 2 of these sets. The other set's still in the box. So you get this, and then you get this. So this works. This is gonna go, get that out of the way for a minute. This is gonna go right in here, like so. And once we get that in, we'll be able to stick our original bolt through here. Kind of get it in. We get the original one in, we get our nut that goes on the back side and tighten that down. Then we can just rotate this and we'll be able to get it lined up in here. And yeah, that'll basically what it's doing is extending it enough to make sure it's still well within its range of motion so that up or down isn't fully maxing out this shock absorber. So what I discovered, looks like order does matter. Basically based on clearances, you got to get the shock attached to this thing first. Like so. Tighten that down, and once you get that attached, then you can work in the bottom side, just because there really doesn't seem to be any other way to get this thing to clear properly based on where this back bracket is. So that's what we're going to go ahead and do. We're going to go ahead and tighten this guy down first. Alright, so the shock extender is on now. The only thing I'm a little curious about is that clearance is real tight right there. It's not touching, but real tight. So I think that's kind of what they're talking about when they say bump stops or your limiting factor. Any lower and it'd definitely be a problem. However, once on the ground, most of the motion is going to be going up, not down. So I think it'll be all right, but definitely interesting. Definitely interesting how tight that clearance is. Might have to take it off eventually and grind down just a little bit. We'll see though. We'll see. Nothing a modification can't fix, but still interesting. I'm gonna go ahead and get the brake caliper on next. All right, went ahead and got it back together. So everything is back buttoned down. Let's go ahead and throw our tire back on and see where it sits. So it's just finished up. I just want to show you guys the control arm distance now that it's on the ground. So plenty of clearance, settled down just fine. So that's pretty awesome. But I mean, initial results, pretty dope. She's definitely up there. Let's go ahead and grab measuring tape and see how much higher it is. I do have 2-inch blocks to go on the rear. However, I'll do that a little bit later. Let's just see how this is. All right, well, it looks like it did what it said. So we are at 37.5. We're at 34.5, 35.5, 36.5, 37.5. Just about exactly 3 inches of lift with an 1.5 inch spacer. What do you know? So check that out, guys. Looks real freaking dope. Finally getting an actual decent sized truck. That's sick. Let's go ahead and pull it out and see what she looks like. All right, so here's a better visual. Measuring it out, it actually is almost exactly 37.5 in the front. It's 37 and like a quarter in the rear. So it's just a hair taller. But dang, she does look pretty freaking good in all honesty. I'm pretty happy with that. That's dope. So we do have 2-inch blocks to go on the rear because I do want to give it some rake back, just because I do tow with this. I want it to, when the trailer on there, I don't want it to settle down and be a straight up squat. So the 2-inch in the back should kind of get it pretty close to where I want it. She looks pretty dope. All right, so we're at the rear of the truck now, and we're gonna go ahead and install the rear blocks. These are them, 2-inch blocks on both driver passenger side. And then my leaf springs are 3 inches wide, so I went ahead and had to email The kit, Heavy Metal Suspensions, was the guy selling it on eBay, and emailed them letting them know that my leaf springs were wider, so they sent me wider things. The first set I got was too narrow, so I had to return them. Partly why there was a delay in installing this thing. So pretty stoked about this. Let's go ahead and start working on it. So first thing I'm going to do, if you can see, I'm going to take you underneath. First thing I'm going to do is undo those 4 bolts. And once we undo those, I'm going to go ahead and get the jack underneath the leaf spring here. I'm going to put it on the front side. You can kind of see it peeking out. We're going to jack it up against this guy. And I'm hoping that I can get it up without trying to loosen the other side just yet. Maybe loosen it a little bit. And just kind of do one side at a time. That's the hope. So I don't want things to get misaligned and have issues. So we're going to go ahead and try and do. Alright, so it should be pretty straightforward like I was saying. These are a 19mm. So I'm going to go ahead and get cracking, crack these loose, and see where this goes. Alright, I went ahead and popped off 4 bolts right there. And then this thing is just going to slide off. Man, she collects a decent amount of dirt in there. But that's just going to hang out for later. And then these U-bolts are now free. And all we're going to do now is go ahead and jack this thing up. Once we get these U-bolts off, get enough space to slide our spacer in, line up little pinholes. Should be good to go. So one down. These new U-bolts, I'm actually pretty happy. They're also quite a bit thicker than these things. Not that it really matters. I'm sure this thing's had a rough life and towed quite a bit, but yeah, so those are off now. Let's go ahead and get our thing jacked. Well, let's get our yeah, let's get it jacked up next. Seems like a good idea. Well, I got it jacked up, and there's a small issue with fitment. This peg right there, I'm gonna put my fingers in between those things, is a little bigger than this peg right here. So I don't know. I think what I'm gonna do is go ahead and honestly drill out this thing, make it a bigger hole. I gotta get a caliper out here and see what size that thing is, probably 1/2 inch. I'll go from there. So it's kind of where we're at right now. All right, so I just tested this out on the other side to make sure it worked, but it did. So what we got to do is basically, I don't know if any of the kits, they might have the right size, but this hole is too small. And I went ahead and got a 3/4 inch drill bit from Lowe's. And all we're gonna do is drill this sucker out, and it fits. So I have the other side on. I'll show you that when I get up there, but I just want to let you know that this is totally a viable option. Make sure you use lube. All right, and it's all drilled out. So I'm gonna go rinse this thing off, head back up to the truck. I will say lining these things up. So the spacer is in. The orientation I went with, so I can show you the other one I have, is you can kind of tell one side shorter, so it goes in. I'll put it in like this, so the short side faces front, same thing over there when it gets on. But now this side's up and in, go ahead and toss the U-bolts on. So we got our 2 sets of U-bolts right here. I'm gonna set your eyes down, and I'm gonna go ahead and strap these on. Like so. Then we gotta grab our hardware. So I did notice that while I was doing this, I had to go ahead and take the e-brake off and make sure that it was in neutral, because I did have to roll the axle back just a little bit, and it took quite a while to line this thing back up. Never done this before. I'm sure there's probably better and easier ways to do it, but that's how I had to do it. So I had like the truck body jacked up and then kind of free rolled the axle underneath. I think it's fit pretty nice. It's awesome. Alrighty. The only downside is these are bigger than the other ones. They're a 13/16 is probably like 21, I think. So I don't have a socket that's going to fit this perfectly, but we'll make do. We'll get her to work. But yeah, so this is the kit. Definitely pretty straightforward. Didn't overextend our shocks or anything. So pretty much like I said earlier, the only reason I'm doing this is because I want to make sure we have a little bit of rake in this truck still. I'm not trying to go perfectly level, and right now there's about almost an inch more in the front than in the rear, maybe like 1/2 inch, but it is what it is. So I'm going to go ahead and get these guys tightened down, and then I'll get the other side on and I'll show you what it looks like. So it's pretty straightforward, not really much else to show here. Alrighty, one side is on. Looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and get that side next. Well, just finished up, but blocks are in place. So let's go ahead and measure it real quick, see how tall this thing is. All right, so it was 37.5. We are now at 39.25. So yeah, just about 2 inches maybe 37.25 is more accurate, but 39.25 to the front, 37.5 just about. So just got about 1.75 inches of rake in there, which should be just about perfect for trailer hauling. Pretty happy. Let's go ahead and pull this thing out and see what she looks like. Oh man, this is pretty dope. But here she is, so check it out. Old girl is now officially, maybe not lifted, but it feels like a normal truck now. It's not freaking slammed, which was a huge win. I've been sick and tired of this thing feeling short, and check it out. So for those of you who are interested, no longer slammed on the front, looking real clean now. Got to give her a wash, but back end's up. Feels like a normal truck now. I'm real happy with this. Freaking killer. I will say, driving it, you can totally tell it's up, and I could not be happier. Like, I'm literally grinning, like, it's so dope. But yeah, I know it's only 2-wheel drive. I did this solely for aesthetics. It has nothing to do with actually helping anything else besides the way it looks. And yeah, so 2-inch blocks in the rear, 1.5 inch spacer up front, which equates to about 3 inches of lift. And I can definitely roll with this. I still wish I could go up higher, maybe a 3-inch body lift down the road, but for right now, I freaking like how this sits. You almost can't even tell that the rear is actually raked a little bit, which is good. When there's a trailer on there, it's gonna level out perfectly. Heck yeah, this is awesome. So let me know what you guys think down in the comments down below. Now, before we totally cut this off, I do have an unfortunate find. So when I jacked up the front of the truck, I found out that I started dripping oil again, and I was like, come on man, like what the heck. So I knew it had to be weird because it wasn't doing it when I was down, but as soon as I jacked it up, it started dripping. And it turns out the tappet cover seal that we replaced, well, the bottom corner furthest to the back of the motor either slipped off when I was installing it, or it got blown out, or it just wasn't tight. That tappet cover is super flimsy material and it only has bolts down the center, so there's nothing around the edge to really seal that thing in there. So I hate with a passion going through stuff multiple times. I hate doing jobs 2 and 3 times, but what I decided I'm going to go ahead and do, the 2 big things that I have left to do leak wise, really there's 3. So there's the hydro booster that's leaking. That goes up on the so that's, I'll show you where that's at a later date when it comes time to do that. But the hydro boost is actually leaking a little bit. It's also leaking into the cab. Not bad, but just enough where you can occasionally get a drip on the floor mat, which is super irritating. So I need to rebuild that. The power steering box is leaking power steering fluid. Not box, but the gearbox, the steering box, I don't really know what you want to call it. That thing is my main power steering leak. That I think I'm going to replace because there is still quite a bit of play in the steering wheel. I've tried tightening up the gears a couple times. Replaced all the front suspension stuff, which did help. Didn't fix the issue though. So that's another one. I don't know what I want to go with just yet, whether a rebuild one or go a little more money and get an aftermarket one that's hardcore and good. I think a Redhead is the one I was thinking of, or something like that. A Red Top, I don't remember. I think it's Redhead. So they're really good, but they're like 400 bucks. So I don't know if I want to do that just yet, but we are going to go ahead and do a billet tappet cover. And what makes it better is instead of having a seal that kind of like just rubber bands around the outside, it's an embedded O-ring basically that runs all the way around it, and it can't move. It's stuck where it is. You bolt that thing to it. It's thick enough to where there's no flimsiness in the metal. It's not going to like creep out, and if it gets bent, well, it can't get bent really. It's pretty solid. So I think we're going to do that, and it just sucks because I do not want to take out the VP44 again. I don't want to take out the fuel lines after just getting them sealed up, but I mean, it is what it is. I'd rather find out about an oil leak now than when I'm on the road trying to tow something. So it sucks, but I think that's the route we got to go with this thing. So she's really getting there, and I feel like every time I get one step closer, I take a step back because there's just something else that pops up. But that billet tappet cover should actually take care of the issues. I thought I was leaking out of the rear main steel in all honesty, but I followed the oil trickle and it's definitely from the rear tappet cover. Once I investigated it, you can see where the freaking seal must have slipped out. It's crazy. I might try just loosening it and shoving the seal back in, but I really am not confident that's going to stay at all. I thought it was good enough last time, but apparently not. So that's the deal with the truck. I appreciate you guys watching this video. As far as getting lifted, this has been on the to-do list forever. Visual wise, I want to finish getting it lifted. Well, we just got it lifted. So visually, lifted is done. Paint and body work is pretty much done. Initial round 1 anyway. May have to revisit some of the stuff with the Bondo techniques that may or may not fail in the future. I don't know. But honestly, like visually, I think it's about where I want it until we get wheels and tires, which will be down the road. I'm not in a rush. I just got new tires on this thing, so I'm really not in a rush. Maybe we should paint the wheels white. I was thinking about that. They do seem to look pretty good. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below. Sorry for the rant, and I appreciate you guys watching. Take it easy. See you in the next video. So enjoy, and yeah, stick around for the build. It's gonna be a fun one. So take it easy.